Welcome to this Sahara 4 tutorial. In this tutorial, we will review the forecast exercises tool. To organize this tutorial, we are going to divide it in the following items. First, we are going to do a quick introduction to the tool and explain exactly what are we talking about when we discuss a forecast exercise. Then, we are going to talk about how the different information that defines a forecast exercise can be classified. What are we talking about when we discuss about exercises and alternatives? What are they? And different examples as well. We are going to talk about how the information has to be organized for it to be understood by Sahara, how we can edit it before the importation. Then we are going to go inside Sahara and show the forecast exercise tool and the different windows that we have, the different options. We are going to have an exercise window and an alternative window. We are going to show the different functionalities that they have, and also we are going to show the different visualization tools that we may have inside each window. Finally, we are going to show how we can export this information between different projects, but also how we can export it to different scenarios inside Sahara with different subphases. The first question that anyone may have when we are discussing forecast exercises in Sahara is what is exactly a forecast exercise? A forecast exercise is basically the estimation of the future development of an asset. We can define it both in terms of activity, like for example, how many wells I'm going to drill in a certain amount of time, or how many wells I'm going to repair, or how many wells I'm going to put in production, but also we might define it in terms of productivity. For example, how much oil I'm going to extract from a certain well or from a certain group of wells that have something in common. Obviously, our forecast exercise is going to be based on certain assumptions that we're going to define. A forecast exercise is going to help us to evaluate different strategies over time, for example, different drilling campaigns. It's also going to help us understand which is the best optimal pace of investment because we are going to have both the production and both the level of activity or the level of investment that we're going to need. Is going to help us to select between different alternatives, different strategies. For example, we might be evaluating if it's better to be focused on a primary recovery strategy or a secondary recovery strategy, which is going to involve more production with less activity or with less cost. We may also be defining between two different technologies that we may need approval of. For example, let's say enhanced recovery, like for example steam flood versus polymer flood. We may want to define which of the two technologies is better for our field. With all this in mind, it's easier to understand how a forecast exercise is defined in Sahara. To define a forecast exercise, we need three different elements. First, an object, might be a well, might be a sidetrack, even it might be a location that is not yet drilled. Then we're going to need a production curve that we're going to tie to this object. The production curve is not going to be associated with any date. It's just going to have like an idea of how much productivity we are going to have in each month. For example, how much oil are we going to produce in the first month, in the second month, in the third month, um, and also the other phases. For example, gas, water. We may also include injected water or injected gas. And then finally, we are going to define at which date this production curve is going to be associated with the object. This is basically the only date that we are interested in is the production date, not the drilling date, not the termination date, the production date. So we are going to need the object, a production curve that is not associated with any date, and the date where this production curve is going to be tied to this object in Sahara. Now that we understand which are the basic elements that define a forecast exercise, we are going to explain how they are organized inside Sahara. First, we have exercises. Exercises show us how different groups of tide wells are organized. Just to give some examples, let's say that we have two different areas of the field that we want to develop. We have tide wells that are defined as tide well A, tide well B, and tide well C, and they have one tide well A for the north side of the field and another one for the south side. So we may want to organize them in two different exercises just to avoid confusion. Another example may be that we are drilling an area that we are not very familiar with and we are having new information each year and it's going to update the expected behavior of the wells. For example, let's say that we have an area that we are going to call area B that we are drilling, and for example in the year 2031 we are having better results than expected, and we are going to update that area or that well type for the next year with better results, with a more optimistic view, because the results were better than what we were expecting. So we are going to have a different exercise for each year, because each year we are going to have different type wells that are going to be updated as we keep drilling wells. Another example may be a new area that we're developing that doesn't have much secondary recovery history, and we want to evaluate if it's better to focus on primary recovery or focus on secondary recovery. We may have two different type groups of type wells. One is going to be completely focused on primary recovery. For example, we may have, for the same area, the expected behavior from primary recovery and the expected behavior if we include injection. So we are going to have two different exercises, one evaluating the scenario where we develop just primary recovery, and the other one that includes secondary recovery. Another example may be having polymer, for example, against another technology. In a highly viscous oil viscosity area, we may have, for example, also thermal recovery, for example, steam development. In this case, we may have, for the same area, the expected behavior from polymer and the expected behavior from steam, and we can compare them both in two different exercises. One exercise is going to be associated with chemical recovery, and the other one is going to be associated with steam recovery. That is going to define our exercise. Different groups of type wells. The next level below is alternatives. Alternatives are similar, but instead of talking about groups of type wells, we are going to talk about different schedules. These schedules may be, just to give an example, we are going to give priority to a block over other. For example, we may want to use the same well types, but we want to see how our production curve evolves if we focus, for example, in the block A instead of the block B. And another example may be that we want to know how our production curve is going to evolve if we decide to focus on drilling injectors instead of drilling producers, or the other way around. We may use the same type wells for the producers and the same type wells for the injectors, but we just want to change how all of them are distributed over time. Another example may be that we have two different schedules. One is going to be more theoretical, associated maybe with the fastest way to recover reserves, and the other one is going to be associated with the wells that we can actually drill. We may have limitations. For example, let's say that some wells are in high sensitivity areas, like for example next to towns, or they may need environmental permits that we don't have yet. So in that case, we are going to need to have a more real, a more close to the operation side schedule that is going to define how we are going to actually proceed instead of the more theoretical one. But we may want to have both of them just to compare uh, with the same type wells. Just what we are going to change is just the dates of each well when it's going to be connected. So, to summarize, we are going to have first exercises that define different groups of type wells, and inside each exercise we may have different alternatives that are going to define the different schedules that are going to use these well types. In this way, we organize all the information that we need to have our forecast exercise defined. Now that we understand which are the basic elements that define a forecast exercise in Sahara, what are exercises and what are alternatives, we are now going to discuss how the information has to be prepared, how it has to be organized for it to be understood by Sahara. First, we are going to have this table over here. We are going to divide the information into three different tables. This is the first one. In this one, we are going to define the wild type names and the different attributes that it may have. The only column that is essential in this case is the wild type name. That is why I painted in yellow. In the three tables, I painted in yellow those that are completely essential for the forecast exercise to work. In this case, we are going to have wild type 1 from 1 to 6. This is the name. We can also define optionally an alternative name, that's just the number. We can also define if this well type is going to be associated with drilling activity or workover activity. And finally, we can define if the well types are associated with with a specific layer, or they are defined on a well level. In this case, as we are doing an example that is quite simple, we just want to work on a well level. But if we wanted, we could work with an exercise on a layer level. In the next table, we have all these columns are essential. We need to define the wild type name, the month, and the different productions, the different phases that this well type is going to have at different months. So just to how this table has to be understood. For the well type 1, in the first month, we are going to have this production of the different phases. Then for the second month, the third month, and the fourth month. If we scroll down to the end of this well type that has like 600 months, we can see that we are going to start again with the next well. In this case, well type 2 is going to have in the first month this production of oil, gas, and water. So we are going to do the same for the six different well types, different month, and the production defined in each month. Then for the last table, we are going to have the schedule. The schedule is going to have just three different essential elements. Obviously, we are going to have the object ID, the well ID. This is the object in Sahara where the information is going to be associated. And then we are going to have the start date, that is the date where the well type curve is going to be connected, and which well type curve I'm going to associate with each object. So as we can see, we have this object over here, this production date, and this well type. Um, there are also other optional information we can add over here. Here we can use raster categories. We are going to see later that we can also add factors to each raster category. And then we are going to also have another variable here that I defined, this campaign, that is optional. This is a variable, a user created variable. We are going to talk later about them, and which is the point of having a user created variable in the schedule side. So that will be all for the information classification and how it has to be imported in Sahara. Now that we have our information in the correct format for Sahara to understand it, we're going to start here now in Sahara with what everyone will think is the first step for creating a forecast exercise, that is importing the information. So now we are going to go here to project, import, and then forecast exercises. Now, if we don't have any previous forecast exercise done in this project, we are going to notice that this is gray out. So we are not going to be able to start importing right away. And this is because first we need to go to the tool itself. We're going to go here to the tool, forecast exercise. And now, if we don't have any previous job done here in the forecast exercise, we are going to notice that we don't have any exercise nor any alternative. So we need to do that first before importing. Here we are going to create a new exercise. We are going to call it exercise, let's say 2032, and we have our first exercise. Here we have a base alternative that is created by default. Here, if we want, we can create, right clicking on the mouse, we can create a new alternative. Let's say, just for an example, that we want to have, besides the base alternative, we want to do another one. Let's call it well injector well priority, just to create the idea that we want to evaluate another schedule where we prioritize the injectors. Then we are going to create another one, and here is production well priority. This is just as an example priority. Now if we want to create a new exercise, we can go here and add another exercise. Let's call it exercise 2031, for example. We can create it, and this is going to also have a default alternative code base. So the important thing here to consider is that we can add exercises, we can add alternatives. We want to decide in which exercise the new alternative is going to go. We just right click on the exercise or in the base that is going to be inside the desired exercise. So also we something important to consider here for the next section as well is that we have different inside the forecast exercise tool or the window. We have two different modes. We have the exercise mode. By clicking on any exercise, we can show that we have this layout over here, and then by clicking on any alternative, this layout is going to change. All the tools available are going to change, and we have other options that we can work with. For each alternative, for each exercise, this is the exercise mode, this is the alternative mode. That is something important to consider when we start talking about the different tools that we have in each mode. Now, for simplicity's sake, we are just going to work with the bare minimum. So let's erase this previous exercise that I created. We could, if we wanted, to change this name. We can rename it here, but we will keep it as base and erase the other alternatives because we are going to do a more simple exercise. So let's just erase this over here and keep it down to this exercise 2032 with just the base alternative. So now that we have created this, we can close it and now import over here, and the forecast exercise should no longer be grayed out. As we can see, we are now able to import either the type wells and attributes or the type well and productions. It is important to have first defined correctly the elements that define the exercise. That is the name of the type wells and the productions associated with the exercise. And then after that we can work with the schedule and different alternatives. So now we are going to start with type wells and attributes. Here we go to the forecast. Here I divided into three text files, different text files, because I find it easier to work like this, but you can work with Excel, no difference there. We just start with the attributes. Here we have a pretty typical importation tab from Sahara. You can the first thing you have to do is to define the exercise where this is going. So we are going to define it to the exercise 2032. That's the only one that we have available. If there were other exercises, they will be in this drop down menu. And then we need to define this column is the name of the type wells. So now we have type well 1 to 6, the alternative names, the subtype, and then the layer in the case that we need to define this associated to any other layer that is not the field level. So now import. We are okay here, everything was imported correctly. And then now we go to productions, import, forecast exercise. We need to define our productions, and we go to the correct forecast and in productions. Here in productions, similar to the last case, we need to define to which exercise this information is going to go. We have the only exercise here. We need to fill out this tab over here with this drop down menu. Then the only column that is not defined yet is the name of the table, which is just called name. And here we have month, the different production of the different phases as we reviewed previously. And the thing that you can do here as well is to define if this column of oil production, you can define it as base or low or high. This is defined as an optimistic outlook or a pessimistic outlook of how the production is going to evolve over time. Maybe you can define this as name, month, oil base, gas base, and water base, but then have another three columns that are water low, gas low, or oil low, and then another three that are oil high, gas high, and water high. And in this way, you can, in the importation, you can define if your different, like a different subphase for the tool. In this case, we are just going to work with base like this. and we are going to, no, sorry, and base, and we are going to import it. Here we have the importation without any issues. And finally, you can import the schedules. That is the last part. In the schedule, we go to the correct forecast and then to schedule. In a schedule, we need to define in a different manner than the other two. We need to define which exercise, the same, but also now we need to define the alternative. This is because alternatives work with different sets of schedules, so you need to define which exercise and which alternative you are going to put this information into. Now we need to define the columns. Here we have well ID. Here a common mistake is putting name here. Remember that name is a reserved field just for tile wells, not for the name of the well or the name of the object. The name of the object is always going to be identifier, like this. And production date over here as date, the correct format, day, month and year, day, month and year, that is correct. And then here name, this is the correct placement for name. Just to avoid confusion, remember that name is always related to the tile well name, not to the name of the object. And here we have category reserves that we are going to use as well, so we are going to import it, and campaign is already defined by default. So we import everything, okay, and now we have imported our information to work with the tool. Now that we have imported all the information that we need to define our forecast exercise, we are able to start working with the tool itself in Sahara. To do so, we will go to Tools, Forecast Exercise, and we are going to open this window in the exercise mode. In the exercise mode, we can see that we have all the tile wells that we have imported. We can check them out. Here we have the different graphs that represent the different phases that have been imported into each tile well. Here we see that we have in this graph, we have in the right scale, we have gas in thousands of cubic meters per day, and we have liquid, both water and oil, in the left side with cubic meters per day. So what we can do here, we can see that with each one that we are selecting, the scale changes. Here we can see that we are in 1000 and here in 0.1 to 1. We can check and see we have something more general. Here we have a scale that has bigger values for both for the right side and for the left side and the right side. What we can do here if we want to compare the different well types is to fix the scale, and now the same scale is used for all the tile wells. Here we can see that the tile well has water in blue, gas in red, and oil in green, and the x-axis is basically the month that we are reviewing. Here the information presented is basically the same that we have imported. We have the name of the tile well, the subtype if it belongs to drilling or workover. Here we have this over here, this indicator here is showing us if the alternatives that are associated with this exercise, if any of the alternatives associated are using this tile well for any object. So in this case, all the tile wells are being used in at least one alternative. We have only one, so we know that in that alternative, all the tile wells are being used. And here, if the level of that the tile well is referring is either well or layer or layer. And here we have the information defined detail for each tile well. Here we have for the first month this production, and the same is reflected in the graph. If we want to do some changes, we can click in this button, we go into edit mode. Here in the edit mode, what we can do is changing the names of any tile well. The other thing that we can do is adding new tile wells. We can do it with this button or this button. They do basically the same. The only difference is that this is going to add a tile well at the end of the table, and this is going to add it in the position that I'm currently in, so we can check it like this. For example, here we have the new tile well, and if I click on this, we have another new one at the end. To erase any tile well, we can use this button. Now we will call this type well new, we are just going to do an example. Here we can see that we can refer it to drilling or workover if we want. We can change it over here. We can see also that it's not being used by any alternative, so this mark is untick. And here on the other buttons we can order this like this. We can change the order. We are going to see that we can ascend or descend with the different categories. And also here we can save all the changes that we did in edit mode, or we can revert back to the original status before clicking on this button. So in this case it will erase this type well new. This type well doesn't have any information. Here we have two copy and paste buttons. We have one group, one set over here on the left side, and we have another one on the right. The one on the left side allows us to copy an entire exercise. Here what we can do is, getting out of this edit mode, we can create a new exercise. Let's create it and call it test exercise. Here we create this one, and now we can click here on edit, copy, left the edit mode, and then go here and we should be able to paste. Let's see if I did something not right. We have to go to edit again. Sorry, I forgot. When you click on the second exercise, you have to go to edit mode. Here is going to tell me if I want to continue to overwrite all the information previously here. So this is empty. We don't have any problem with that. And here we have like a sort of an importation mode where we have the name, the subtype. This is not going to be used because it's automatically calculated if we are using or not the type well in the alternative associated. And here the level is the same, so we should click here, so these are not added as a new well. Ensure that you have row header. If you use this option, ensure that you have this on 1, and we can copy. And now we have the same type wells that we defined previously on this other exercise. So now both have the same wells. This is useful if you need to do a new exercise which has like similar wells. Maybe you want to do some small changes and compare different exercise. You can do it with this copy and paste option. Then the other copy and paste, the one on the right over here, works by copying. Let's go to edit mode. Right, so if we want to use this one, we have to start outside edit mode. We are going to mark this. Let's say we want to copy this type well, the information inside the type well, so all the months that are involved, the production on each month of all the phases that define this type well. We are going to copy it, and we are going to put it over here in this one that is empty. And now we have something similar. We have a sort of import mode. We define this as 1. We go here in oil, cubic meters per day. We have gas. This is thousands of cubic meters per day, and water. We have cubic meters per day. So now we import it, and now we have another type well that is very similar to the one. It's the same that the type well one, because we just copied it, and now if we wanted, we could do some modifications, but we could create a new type well based on type well one in this case. So that's the function of these copy and paste buttons on the right. Now we can see here if we have load any information as low, base, high, or all of them for any of these wells. We can check it with this drop down menu over here. In this case, all the information is just base, so no changes there. But in the case that you have loaded it, you can see in this with this menu over here. Now next, we're going to erase this exercise to avoid confusion. And over here we have the reserve categories factors. Here we can ensure that for each reserve category that we have defined inside the alternative, we are going to affect it by a factor that is going to reduce production. In this case, in the example that we have here for P1, we are just going to we are not going to do any change. For P2, we are going to multiply by 0.8, which means a reduction in production for the reserves that we are less sure of. And finally, for P3, we are going to do the same, but for 0.6, it's going to be a smaller factor. And now we have some options over here to change the graph. Here you can change the scale from logarithmic to linear. You can do it here. Then you can also define which phase you are going to change in the graph. In this case, we have oil. We can define the style of line that we want to use for oil for this graph, and also the thickness that we may use. Here you can change, for example, gas. Maybe you want to use another color. Let's change it back and do it with another style of line and another thickness of the line. Now that we have seen all the functionalities associated with the exercise mode, we are going to move on to the alternative mode. In the alternative mode, we are going to see that we have all the information that we have imported loaded into this table. In this case, we are going to see the date where the activity is associated with the well. The object in this case might be a well, maybe a sidetrack or a zone inside a well, the type well that is associated with, and this column is going to indicate if this combination of object, type well, and date is defined for on a well level or a layer level. Here we are going to see if we have any reserve category imported. We can see that we have P1 here, P3, P2. This campaign variable, I created it, so we are going to see what is for in a few minutes. And then we can see if the activity is associated with drilling, if the well type is associated with drilling or with workover. Then we are going to have this status over here bar that is going to show us if the well is active or not in the, or better say, this combination of well, type well, and date is active or not in the forecast exercise. On the lower side of the window, we are going to see two different graphs. The graph on the left is going to show us the activity that is associated with the object and the date. So we are basically doing a graph of the production just for this object. Here we can see that if we have two different subtypes, in this case drilling and workover, they are going to be shown with two different colors, and we have the plan for this object. In this case, it's going to be drilled on 2031, and then we are going to do a workover on 2037. And we have the two different curves of production shown in this graph. In this other graph on the right, we can see the activity and how this well in particular, this object in particular, is going to reflect on the total production of the forecast exercise. The line in blue is this object in particular, this well, both like is adding up both the drilling activity and the workover activity, and we are going to see this red line over here that is going to represent the total activity or the total production of all the different objects that are defined in this forecast exercise. So we can see that it's going to reflect how much each one is adding up to the total. Well, here, same as the previous case, we can just fix or unfix the scale to if we want to compare or not. Here we have other options associated with the edition. If we go into edit mode, we are going to be able to change the date manually, and we are able to change the category of the reserves. If we have different campaigns, we can change it over here as well. And basically that. We can also check or uncheck this if we want to deactivate a specific combination of well, type well, and date. And here we can change the factor if we want to affect everything for a factor to reduce the total production that comes from this type well. Clicking on edit mode, we have other options available. We can, for example, save all the changes that we did while on edit mode with this button. We can revert them with this other button, restore as it was before clicking on edit. Here we can filter wells that we need. For example, let's say that we want to see all the activity associated with P66. Here we can select it over here. We're just going to select it. Now that it's selected here, if I click on this button over here on this filter, we are going to see all the activity related just to this well. Here we have the drilling activity over here and the workover activity later on 2036. Now we can click on here to unfilter. Here we can add more combinations of well, type well, and date. The same logic as before, we can add it with these two buttons, or we can erase elements with this one. Here with this other button configuration, we can here we click now. We can, for example, if we want to hide non-essential variables, for example, campaign, we can share we can hide it here, and we will see that now campaign is no longer available for us to see. We can go back and put it back again, and now campaign is over here but with the previous information erased. So that is something important to consider. You should only do it if you haven't loaded before. Here we can change manually the date. For example, just 1 month. This is going to move the date where this type well is going to be associated with this object one month before or 1 month after. With this other button, this is also useful to change the status if you want to deactivate a certain combination of well, type well, and date. And with this one, we are going to order it for different factors. For example, here everything is ordered by sorted by the name of the well. Here by the type well, everything that is type well 1 first, then later on with the rest. And for example, we can do it as well for the drilling activity or workover activity, and also for status. The one that is deactivated goes first. We can copy and paste alternatives the same way as we shown before. That's exactly the same. And here we have all the wells that are all the objects that are associated with this alternative. We can filter here as we can see, and later filter them over here as we have saw before. And here all the type wells that are defined in the exercise, either the one that are used or the one that are not used. For example, the new type well that we defined on the exercise on the previous part of the video is still here. Then on the left over here, down here we can change some things associated with the graph. Here, for example, we can apply the different factors. For example, here we see in the case this well is P1, but if we change it back to P2 and we apply the factors, we are going to see that the production is reduced by 0.8. That is the factor defined in the exercise. In the case of 0.3, it's going to reduce further to 0.6. This is going to change both the individual well here, and is going to also change the total the graph that totalizes all the activity of the forecast exercise. Here with this preserve, we are going to decide how to solve the issue of the first month. This happens whenever a well is connected in a day that is not the first day of the month. You have two different possible options. First, if you define that you want to preserve the cumulative value of the type well, it's going to respect the total cumulative oil produced for that type well, but it's going to reduce the total rate of the first month to make it work. On the other hand, if you decide that you want to preserve rate, the rate is going to be preserved, but the total cumulative production of that type well is going to be reduced for that month where the well didn't produce the whole month. So you have two options to resolve that issue of the wells that are not connected on the first day of the month. Then you can check the different, if you have different optimistic or pessimistic outlook for that type well, you can review them over here. We just have base here, so it's not the case. Here you can change where the x-axis of the chart is going to start and end. In this case, as you can see, all our activity is around 2030, so we can move this a little bit closer to the present day. Let's just say 2020, and we have a better look of the graph for both the right side graph and the left side graph and the right side graph. Here we can change which phase is being reviewed. In this case, we can, for example, see the gas production, the total gas production associated with the activity, and how much this activity is going to add to the total gas production of the forecast exercise. Same goes for water, or same goes for oil. We can change which phase we are reviewing on the graph below. Then this is just changing the scale from logarithmic to linear. And then here we can review, let's check, for example, this well that has drilling and workover activity. In this case, we can review just drilling activity, just workover activity, or we can see them both added, or maybe like this, just this is going to be just the workover activity and the total activity, both adding workover and drilling. So we have several options to check how we want to see the production. And here we have the same that we have in the previous case for the exercise window. We can decide if we want to use another color for example, drilling. Well, this is not the best because it's already red, but for example, we can use this color or this other color or any color that we desire, and changing the style of the line, or how thick it is. And this the same for the workover curve and the total curve. Now if we click on this other one, we are going to have similar options. We can apply the R factors. This is going to apply for both graphs, but what is more interesting is that we can group the schedule for different attributes. We have several options here. We can, for example, group it by the year. Here we can see in blue the activity of the well that is currently selected, in this case PE 567, and we can see in different colors how much production of oil in this case is being added by the activity of each year. Here, for example, we can do the same for configuration. We can stack it here with configuration. We are going to see everything stacked. We can check over here that we have activity in 2036. Let's say, for example, that this is a mistake, that we don't have activity in this year, and it was maybe a number that was not correctly input. So we are going to change it. Let's say that it's 2033, just an example. And now we have these three different colors, each one representing how much production of oil to the total forecast exercise each year, the activity done on each year is adding up. Here we can stack it, and we can also draw the areas to see how much each one is contributing to the total. We can group it with other variables. For example, if we have static attributes associated with the objects, we can group it by the static attribute. In this case, for example, batteries. Most in this case are not assigned, but some of them are. We can do it by other, for example, for each type well, how much production each type well is adding up, and other variables that we may use of the static attributes. Here we have schedule attributes. These are as campaign as the one that I created. We can see that we have most of them are not assigned because I erased them back when I unselected this option. And we can do the stack or just highlighting the area below the curve. In this case, we are going to left it like here with year, and we are going to leave it with the area, highlighting the area below the curve on each case.
Now that we have finished editing both the exercise and the alternative, the final step is to export the forecast into a forecast scenario. For that, we are going to click on this button over here, and in this window we are going to see that we have several options. We have to select a scenario. Here the only scenarios listed are forecast scenario. In the case that in your project you haven't created any forecast scenario, you're not going to see any option over here. I created 4 different forecast scenario with 4 different options. Here for the first one I created one with the subphases of reserves P1, P2 and P3. Here what we can see is how the different classifications of the different well types are going to be classified on these different subphases already available on the scenario. So, for example, if you have a type well that is of the subtype drilling and is belongs to a P1 category, is going to go to the PUD, that means undeveloped reserves, subphase. In the case that you have anything either drilling or workover in P2, it's going to go to P2 subphase. And here, for example, for the workover, it's going to go on PNDP. So in this case, we are going to check also all the different productions that are loaded in this forecast scenario, which ones are going to be deleted. So as we are importing things in P1, in PNP, PUD, P2, P3, and 2P and 3P, we are going to erase everything that was previously there. This is especially useful if you have to do like several runs of forecast scenario and you don't care to preserve the previous information that you have. So in this case, it's going to be divided by the reserve category. Also, we can have workover drilling. In this case, we are working just with these subphases, total, workover, and drilling. In the case of the base subphase, it's not going to be affected, so it's not going to be deleted by default. We can delete it if you want, but that's not the case. And here it's just going to be classified without taking into account the reserve category, just the subphase. So if you have anything from drilling, it's going to be saved in drilling or workover. In the case that we have in the case that we have a low base and high well types loaded, is going to be selected to the corresponding alternative. In this case, everything is base, so the only thing that is going to be erased by default is the base, previously loaded base information in this scenario, and we are going to load everything as base. And in the case of primary secondary, this is not going to make any differentiation. It's just going to erase everything that was here before, and is going to just load everything on the total surface. We can change this if needed, but the point is that in this case, Sahara doesn't do any differentiation between primary or secondary recovery with the information that we provided for the forecast exercise. So in this case, we are just going to load this in the reserve category. So now we are going to click on save, and we are going to check that we have a number of errors over here. Here we have two types of errors. The most important one are the ones in red. In the case of the ones in yellow, these uh, these inconsistencies are not as important, because what this means is that we have well types that have like a long time, like 600 months. That means that some of these dates, some of these type wells are going to finish after the end date of the project, so they are going to be truncated on the end of the project. But that's not a big deal. I mean, in this case, we are not going to care for information that is outside the scope of the project, so it's not a big problem. But these ones are more important, the ones in red. Here, what is being reported is that we had three wells that had more than one well type or more than one date of drilling, which is not correct. We know that we cannot drill well more than once. So in this case, we have to check. We are going to save this report. We are going to copy better, and check for these three different wells what is happening exactly. So we have P678, 676, and 651. So let's go on OK here, and let's use this tool over here to look for these wells and see what is happening. So 678, we are going to select it, and we are going to filter it. And as you can see here, we have two drilling well types associated with this well. Let's assume this is a mistake that we have identified, so we are going to just erase one of them, or we can just uncheck this status over here to have it not be part of this forecast exercise, which is better than erasing it, because in the case that we decide that this date or this well type of this type well is better for this well, we are going to just have it as a backup. So let's look for the two other ones. We have 676. That we have the same problem. We have two different well types associated, type well 1 and type well 4. We're going to just uncheck this one, And the final one, probably in the same situation, 651, we can see that we are on the same page with this other one, so we are going to do the same. So now we are going to save these modifications. Okay, we don't have any issue there, and go out of edit mode. Now let's go again here, do everything exactly the same. We are going to erase everything that was here imported before, so we are just going to save. And now we just have this same inconsistency report for the date thing, but that's not it's not a big problem. So we are just going to okay, and now everything is calculated. We are now able to check in the production tab, in the production window, if this was correctly imported into the scenario. And we can check, let's select all the wells that are here, and now we can see how the curve looks for these wells. This is the oil curve of this scenario. We can check it. Let's go check. We have monthly production in the forecast P1, P2, and P3 scenario. We have oil on the well level and the PUD subphase. In the case that we want to see another subphase, let's just check it out. Oil object, and let's say that we want to see everything PNDP related, just the workover activity. So we're going to do the same, and we have this other curve. Let's put in another color to make it more clear, something like this. And this will be the workover activity that has been loaded for this scenario. In this case, we are combining the schedule that we define with the different dates, the objects defining the schedule, and also the well types defined on the scenario. So we have the combination of the alternative on this scenario to create this forecast exercise, and have now this information exported into a production window that we can work with as with any other production. Now, as a way to finish this tutorial, we are going to review some other options that we have working with the information available for forecast exercise. Here, for example, to delete information, we go here in forecast exercise. We have three options to delete. We can, in the case of this tab, type wells, we can delete completely the type wells defined. We are going to erase both the productions and the attributes associated. For example, if it was a well type related to drilling or workover, all this information is going to be erased. Here we can select the exercise. In the case of rates, it's similar. We are going to erase all the information, not information that defines the name and the attributes of the well type, only the production associated. So we are going to, when we finish erasing here, we are going to have an empty type well without any production associated, without any subphase associated. And here in schedule, we just erase completely the alternative that we need to erase. So we can select the forecast or the exercise and the alternative. So in this case, the schedule completely erase a whole alternative. Um, then for export of information, well, in the case of the information that is already saved in a forecast scenario, it's going to work like any other production. We're going to export it. We can move it to Excel, or we can share it between different projects, as we will do with any other production. And what we can do as well is export the information of the forecast exercise in this format. In this case, we have also three different options. Here we can export all the names of the well types and the attributes, the productions, we can select the exercise that we need to export, and in the case of the schedule, we are going to export all the information related to the alternative. This is especially useful if we want to communicate information between different projects or sub-projects, because it's already in a format easy to read for Sahara. So this is a good way to just move the information from one project to the other. And finally, we can also do some work with variables. Here we go here to forecast exercise. In the variables, we have two different types. We have names and schedule. In the case of names, we don't have much options. The only thing that we can do here is change some keywords. We can edit this variable and change the keywords associated, but we cannot do much more than that. we cannot create new names variables here. So the ones that are defined, as they are connected to the surfaces of the different types of forecast scenario, we cannot do much editing here. And in the case of the schedule variable, we can create new variables here. We can create, for example, this one that I created, campaign, is one that we can use. Especially, it's especially useful for grouping the information in the alternative tab that we reviewed before, in the alternative mode. We can group the information and show it in the graph with different variables of schedule, like this one. And here we can edit all the information related to the variable and also create new variables. So that will be all for this tutorial. If you have doubts about this tutorial or any other tool in Sahara, please feel free to contact us at the support email. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your attention. See you in the next tutorial.